Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well and staying safe. I am kicking off session number 3, and I'm super excited for it. Thank you for tuning in throughout the day. I know for many of you, you just listened into an incredibly inspirational and hopeful conversation with Dr. Rana El-Kayoubi and Fatima El-Kabi. And so I hope you enjoyed listening to how they're using technology and innovation to advance not only girls' education worldwide, but also empower women. And so it is my absolute pleasure to announce our next session, which is titled Sisters in Solidarity, Global Visions, Activist Realities. And so I think this will be absolutely wonderful. First of all, we have Maryam and Nivaal joining us, and they're going to introduce themselves and their speakers accordingly. So enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you so much for introducing us, Jana. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sisters in Solidarity Global Visions Activist Realities session. We are Maryam and Nivaal, and to celebrate Jana's 17th birthday, we will be talking with women activists from across the globe, Nora, Wadi, and Mariana.
We will explore the role that education played in paving the way for activists from across the globe to advocate for gender equality in and through education. And we are firstly joined by Nora Fyles, the head of Secretariat for the UN Girls Education Initiative.
Thank you so much for joining us, Nora. So our first question is, you represent the UN Girls Education Initiative, which is now entering its 20th year. Could you tell us a bit more about this powerful partnership?
Great to be with you, and thank you very much for this question. Yes, UNGEI was launched in 2000. It sounds like a long time ago, and a lot has happened over those last 20 years. It was launched as part of the previous set of global goals. It was launched during the MDG, at the same time as the MDGs, and alongside the education goals, the Education for All goals, to make sure that we together achieved our commitments. We followed up on what we said we were going to do and make sure we didn't drop this commitment to rights of all girls and women to education and also to advancing gender equality. Even at that time, we had that language of gender equality in and through education, which is pretty interesting that we're still on the same page, we're still relevant. The other thing that happened at that launch was we launched a partnership. It's called an initiative, but the design was us working together because we knew right from the outset we had to try something else. It could not be simply individual organizations doing some really good work. We needed to work collectively in order to achieve those results which we had in mind, which were pretty revolutionary.
That's awesome.
That's really inspiring as well. And you yourself are a fierce leader and trailblazer in girls' education and in this space as well. So what inspired you to devote your life to advocating for girls' education, and what continues to inspire you?
Well, that's a really interesting question you asked me, and it took me a while to think about what I wanted to share, because it's a long story. You don't wake up one morning and say, I know this is my future, I'm going to be doing this. It takes bits and pieces to bring it together. But what I have come to understand is that girls' education is a core and a critical part of gender equality and advancing gender equality broadly. If we commit to and actually achieve this work of giving girls tools so they can make sound decisions, that has a knock-on effect in terms of how they deal with questions about their bodies, how they deal with questions about how they spend their own money, and the kind of battles they will face themselves. If we give girls the skills to achieve their potential, that opens up opportunities for women in livelihoods to advance, to become part of the labor market, if that's the right thing for them, or to use their skills to make extremely great family structures and family businesses or whatever they want to do. But in order to get there, they need the skills, they need decision-making power, they need to believe in themselves, they need to see models of what is possible out there in order to aspire to do that. And now those are all the components of a solid education system that puts girls at the equal as anybody else, girls and boys equally, having access to the opportunities and the skills and competencies. The other piece is that we need to also, I'm committed to working on the rights of girls and women to education and to building the education system along the way, because that is going to benefit everybody. When we have those ingredients in place so that schools are safe spaces for learning, so that the curriculum actually reflects models of men and women in a variety of different types of lives and livelihoods and types of work, caregiving work, pilots, engineers, childcare people.
Yeah.
All of those opportunities, if we make that happen, if we change the power dynamics within classrooms around how girls and boys are treated, and through pedagogy, we call it education terms, when we get right this balance between men and women in positions of authority within the school system, we are also chipping away at that deep structure of gender inequality, not only in education, but in the society as well.
Absolutely.
So how much more exciting is that? Where the work has to be done.
Yes, exactly. And that's so powerful what you've shared as well in your insights. And thank you so much for sharing that.
So now I wanted to turn to you. Just trying to get it right here. You both are, you use the word powerful, and you're both powerful activists for girls' education and are working for various causes that impact girls. Can you tell us what inspired your activism? Tell us more about the work that you do and the causes you work for.
Yeah, for sure. So our journey actually began in Pakistan, which is our home country. And we visited Pakistan on a family trip while we were 8 years old, and our grandmother donated some land in our village to have a girls' school built there. And we visited that school when we were during that trip, and we learned from those girls that they had the same dreams and aspirations as us, but they were going to quit school when they reached grade 5 because of poverty in the village, and their families wanted them to work instead. And it was just so we couldn't connect with that because we thought that school was mandatory for all kids and that every kid had to go to school growing up in Canada. And so it was from that moment that we decided that we wanted to continue our grandmother's dream for those girls and inspire them to continue their education. And we've been so fortunate to be able to work in that village and do workshops with them and speak to their parents about the importance of educating their daughters. And in 2015, some of those girls actually went on to high school, which was such a big, it was such a big deal for us. And it's just so inspiring to see their journeys. And we recently released a documentary about that journey as well and the status of girls' education in Pakistan. But so that's one of the causes that we care about. But we believe that there's so many other causes that Maryam can speak about as well.
Yeah, we recently started our nonprofit, which works for gender equality, inclusivity, and also climate justice through development projects, advocacy, and storytelling. And so we really, like in Canada as well, we felt that, you don't have to travel to the other side of the world to make a difference. And that's something we really champion because we believe that you can make a difference from anywhere. And yeah, that's what took us through Canada. We do a lot of volunteer work here, and then also recently started our nonprofit. And so that's some of the work that we do and some of the causes we care about. Yeah.
Well, that's really inspiring. Thank you very much. We can take a number of lessons from your own personal connection with those girls in the community, and then how you exported that into a much bigger space. So congratulations. That's really inspiring.
Thank you. And when we connected a few days ago, we spoke about the challenges and potential barriers that women in their diversity face in activism and advocacy as well. And so it actually reminded us of a quote by Rupi Kaur, which is, "I stand on the sacrifices of a million women before me, thinking, what can I do to make this mountain taller so the women after me can see further?" So thank you for your contributions throughout this field during your career and for paving the way for young women like ourselves to be advocates along the way. So going off of that, can you speak to the realities of being a woman in the space and what you have learned along the way?
Well, that's a really important question, and I'm really glad you asked me that. It's not something we ask each other very often, but it's part of our everyday get up in the morning. This is what we need. This is the armor we must put on in order to do the work we want to do, especially if we're in positions of authority of some kind or of leadership or of opening up opportunities like you're doing with your nonprofit. I have to start by saying, I, like you, grew up in Canada. I was in Ottawa instead of Toronto, but I grew up in Canada. I grew up in a family that had a mom and dad there. I grew up going to school every day, expectation that I would go to university. My grandmother, which is a long time ago, folks, I'm not young, she was offered a scholarship to go to McGill University, but she was not permitted by her parents to go. I didn't face that. My parents were sure I was going to university, and they were going to make it possible for me to do that. So I come with a privilege, which I own, right? And I must also deal with. It tells me an awful lot about privilege and the challenges. It tells me also about the challenges of engaging with those who have more. And so we're basically talking about working in non-feminist, let us say, institutions where power is provided to those who are in our environment more likely to be able to claim that, which is a male approach.
Yeah.
So, for example, in a meeting, who talks? Who talks over somebody else? Who, after someone else speaks, says, oh yeah, well, as I was saying, blah, 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 blah. Who's in the room? Are they all male? Are they all from the global north? Are they all of a certain age? Are they all of a certain privilege? And that's what we face every day. In fact, in some places, which you referenced earlier, you know, it's a toxic environment for women to be stepping up and speaking out for the rights, their own rights, or for the rights of girls or others who are marginalized by whatever environment where they find themselves. But that's where we need to be. That's where we need to work differently and demonstrate this model, which we have come to understand is the way forward, is paying attention to those dynamics. In order that everybody doesn't feel alone, we must put them on the table so we're conscious of where we're running into those barriers, which are because we're female or present with that female gender. And we also need to use our power differently. We use our power with. We break down the barriers where we can. We invest, for example, UNGEI invests, for example, in making sure that those from the global south are at the same decision-making table, where there are youth at the same decision-making table as those who are who've been around a long time.
Yeah.
So that we're demonstrating by our work the difference between working in an environment which builds and reinforces the power dynamics where somebody wins and the rest of us don't, and we practice what we know is what we have faced as women. I have faced, in spite of the fact that I come with a whole lot of privilege.
Yeah, definitely. And that's so important to share as well, and recognizing that you have privilege, and it's not an easy thing to do, but you recognize that and you also make space for other young women to take action as well, which is just incredible.
And yeah, that brings us to our next question, which is what is something you wish you had known when entering the development space? For other young women who are looking into it, I know like your journey has been so incredible. So yeah, like what is something you wish you had known when starting?
Well, I learned some really hard things at the very beginning of my career. I was working at a federation of co-ops because my background is education. I was working in education. And we were working with refugees from neighboring countries. And I was told by this extremely wise older man, who's probably much younger than I am now. I was 23 at the time. I was in the field. And he said, well, actually, dear, you're rich and we're poor and you have nothing to give us. Well, that kind of set me a little bit aback. And I said, well, you know what? He's right. You're right. But I can help you get resources which will enable you to do things differently. So I learned really early on, and I would say with everybody, check your assumptions before you even begin. Check your own, what you actually offer and who you need to consult fundamentally before you make any recommendation. In development work, those who know are those who are in the life, not someone who's learned it through a book. That background study really helps, but it's definitely the beginning only. You need to start with understanding the context and consult those who are in that space, living those lives.
Are we back now? Okay.
Sorry, I think that we got kicked out because our network connection was, I don't know. something
disrupted.
happened.
But yeah, did you get a chance to finish up your answer?
I think so. I
Okay.
just said the end.
Perfect.
I think I finished my sentence and then it cut. Well, I want to talk about youth, but anyway, maybe that won't happen. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think we do have a chance for you to speak a little bit more
Yes,
about
it says you
the
got
youth, like.
Natasha's telling us that we got kicked off. You got kicked off. We got kicked off.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I think it's good now. So we can come in and speak about the youth networks that UNGEI is involved
That's it.
in, and you can touch briefly on that as well.
That's it. That's perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so like we know that youth participation is a priority for UNGEI, and why is it important for UNGEI to partner with young activists like ourselves and the other young women we'll be meeting soon?
Well, as I mentioned before, we are committed to breaking down power dynamics, and one of them is age. We know that. And so we are basically by design an intergenerational partnership and committed to engaging with youth who are leaders and their networks. We must actually change the language as well. It's not just engaging youth, but actually making sure that they are partnering with us and we are partnering with them, allowing them the real space, the authentic space to lead. We also know we're embarrassed to say, but we also know it's effective.
Yeah.
And builds our credibility. Youth have a dynamism and a set of skills which is fresh and allows our work to go much further. I mean, the advocacy and networking which we have been able to achieve through our youth the Transform Education campaign, which brings together over 300 youth networks, the online work which is being done by my team, the intergenerational dialogues which we've been supporting and contributing to with global education leaders. Yesterday, Julia Gillard from the Global Partnership for Education, Baroness Sugg from the Government of the United Kingdom. Seriously, that whole dynamic work, amazingly powerful, and it builds our credibility that we're listening to those who are living the life. It's a privilege to meet the youth activists and those who you're going to speak with in a few minutes. But we also know, boy, it's a real support to UNGEI's agenda and our ability to perform as we really want to.
Yes, for sure. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, Nora. We were able to learn so much and are sure our audience was able to gain very important insights from our conversation with you today.
Great.
One of our highlights of our discussion was definitely having to hear the different perspectives of young people and why that's important, as you just mentioned, to like global conversations around education. And so for this reason, we're so happy to welcome two young advocates to this conversation as well, Mariana and Wadi, and they're going to be joining us now. Perfect. So thank you so much both for joining us once again. And would you all be able to introduce yourselves and your activism, as well as where you're currently based and what life is like under COVID-19?
Let's start with you, Mariana.
Yeah, sure. Well, my name is Mariana. I am 19 years old, and I'm from Monterrey, Mexico, where I'm currently at. Usually I study in France, but well, because of COVID-19, I had to come back home a little early. And well, my quarantine has been good. I spent some time quarantined in France, and now I'm quarantined in Mexico. So we're still doing that.
That's awesome. And Wadi, what do you think?
Hi, I wasn't hearing Mariana clearly. I'm not sure you can hear me.
We can hear you. Yeah,
we can
you're
hear
perfect.
You. Yeah.
Okay, so you said I should introduce myself and what COVID-19 is like. So I'm Wadi Ben-Hirki. I'm from northern Nigeria. I'm currently based in Nigeria, and I founded the Wadi Ben-Hirki Foundation, which focuses on education, gender equality, and peace. COVID-19 situation, so many plans have changed, but we have to learn to understand that it's a global pandemic which affects everyone. So for now, I'm trying to make the most of the time by, being productive, reading books, watching documentaries, and taking online courses, which I've not been able to. So I think I'm being productive. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. And thank you so much for both sharing that. And we know that we're all from different regions of the world advocating for girls' rights and education in our own ways. So how has being a woman and its intersection with your other identities influenced your individual journey in this space? Let's begin with you, Wadi.
Being a woman, I would say, is amazing. I don't think I would have wanted to be anything else. And I think it helps me to understand the realities of young girls in my region, because most times if you don't understand where they're coming from, you may not be able to help them to the best of your abilities. So I have not lived the life that they've lived in terms of being extremely poor or not being able to have education. But living in this region makes me understand that these things exist, and I'm able to talk directly with them when we go for programs, outreaches. And I think for me, I faced issues where people, when I want to be vocal, they say things like a girl or a woman should be seen but not heard. So I have my own reality. I have where I've been backlashed. But I mean, all those things just stir up the passion in me and fuel me to do more and help as many lives as possible, starting from my community. So being a woman has been amazing thus far, despite the challenges.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And Mariana, we'd love to hear from you on this question as well.
Sure. Well, as a woman from the Hispanic community, the Latino community, I think I've gained a perspective to a really particular cultural phenomenon, which is, being from a country that was colonized and thus still suffers the consequences of having a conservative and misogynistic mindset. So sometimes, even if Mexico has been independent for a long time, there are a lot of ideas that are still exist that affect girls. So I've been really privileged. I've been able to study my whole life, and education has never been denied to me. But I know that's not the reality for most kids in my country, let alone girls. So I think it has given me, the opportunity to stand up and help others stand up with me.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that as well. And that brings us to our next question. What moment do you think really sparked your activism journey? Let's start with you, Wadi.
I would say there are different moments, but if I want to pick one or two, it would be when I was in primary school. When I was in primary school, when there was a classmate of mine who was around my age, 9, 10, and she was married off, given off as collateral because her father couldn't pay off his debt. So as at then, all I knew was, why would someone my age, at 10, be married? But I didn't even understand the repercussion and how deep it was until I grew up and I saw that that was the reality in my environment. And it was so sad for me. I'm 23 now. I graduated from university 3 years ago. I have a career I'm pursuing, but only a handful, in my area have this reality. So I sit down and think, although I'm grateful for the privilege I have, I'm also very sad that only few people have this reality as mine. And so this always sparks up, the passion in me to say things should change. I mean, there are many girls who are probably more intelligent, more vocal, more passionate than I am, but the society and the environment which they found themselves in, hasn't favored them. Some of them are married, some of them have no dreams anymore. Some of them, are victims of so many issues, that we're fighting against. So these things spark up, the passion in me to say that, look at me now, following my dreams and believing that I'll be something in future. But only a few people have this, privilege. So this sparks up, the passion in me to want to be a change in my country, in my community, and in the world.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for sharing that. And you are doing such amazing work, so that's really, really inspiring as well. And
Thank you
Mariana,
so
we'd love to
much.
hear. Yeah, you're welcome. And Mariana, we'd love to hear your response to this question as well.
Sure. So for me, I think my activism started when I was around 15 or 16. So my grandma took me to the 100th anniversary of the first feminist congress in Mexico, which was the second one in Latin America. And it was really empowering to hear so many incredible women stand up and talk about how women's rights have evolved throughout the years. But it was also really sad to realize that 100 years after this first Congress happened in Mexico, most of the issues are still unsolved. So the women back then, they wanted education, they wanted girls to go to primary school, so now girls can go to primary school, but they mostly stop there. We don't have a lot of women in, big leadership positions, so that really made me realize, wow, the fight is not over. And my grandma, she was one of the ones who kind of like started that fight, but it's up to the next generation to continue doing that, to fill in the gaps that haven't been able to be that haven't been addressed yet. So it really made me realize that women still need to be freed from the yoke of tradition. They still need education. They still need empowerment, especially around science and STEM areas, which is what my focus has been primarily on. So for me, it was my grandma. I think for you guys, for you, Maryam Nivaal, as well. So I've been really lucky to have her as my guide and my mentor.
Amazing. Yeah, that's so inspiring as well. And the women, if we have powerful women in our lives to inspire us, we're able to do so much more. So that's really incredible. But upon like I guess when we're doing activism and while we're doing all of these things, there's certain challenges that come up as well. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you see girls face in your community, and how have you and your fellow activists worked to address these challenges and overcome these barriers?
Let's start with you, Mariana.
So for women in Mexico, it's mostly a lack of sexual and reproductive education. We still have a lot of child marriages, a lot of teenage and child pregnancies. So that's a really sad reality that is often not addressed in politics. So in the Congress, they're still trying to ban sexual education from public schools, which is extremely sad. It's 2020 and we still have these kinds of issues. And also, well, a lack of encouragement for women outside normally like women professions for women. So a lot of girls are still expected to stay at home or take care of their parents or follow, not follow maybe engineering majors, just stay in education, which is, it's awesome, but we don't have to limit our girls just because they were born a girl. So in Mexico, I see that issue, and in France, where I'm gonna start kind of being more active in the next year, I see a lot of issues facing women who are immigrants, women who are not white, women from the Muslim community. So there's still a lot of challenges for women who don't have the privilege of being from the country of origin where they're at or practice the same religion. So that will be, I think, the next step in my activism.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Wadi, what about you? How are you helping to address the challenges that girls face in your community? You're muted. Would you be able to unmute your mic and then we can hear you?
Sorry.
That's perfect. Yeah. Thank
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So for me, the major challenge that girls face in my community is child marriage. Based on statistics, there are about 48% of girls who are married off before 18 in Nigeria. And for me, child marriage, is linked to other things. For example, the earlier I get married, it means that I may not be able to go to school anymore. And that means I wouldn't have maybe a good enough job, a stable job or employment that I'll use to cater for myself or my family. And what would that mean? My children will likely end up going into social vices because they have to survive. So different, and even this uncontrolled increase in population we see is as a result of child marriage, because the earlier one gets married, the more children they're likely to have. And so when I sit down and look at the issue, it's just linked to so many things. And for me, what I do with fellow activists and passionate young people is through my organization. We have the Girls Not Wives campaign, and all we do is sensitization. We go to different communities, educate them of the importance of education. We use ourselves as examples because we're easy to relate with than using people from maybe other parts of the world. So if, for example, I tell them, look at what education has done for me, it has enlightened me, it has empowered me, they understand that maybe if they take their child to school, she would even do better, things like that. And so we use ourselves as examples. We also give scholarships to some of the outstanding girls in the community. And another project is called Sheroes, Female Heroes, where we empower women to be the best versions of themselves. We teach them different skills and vocations, which they'll be able to use to make money using a needs assessment, going to the community, which maybe is it tailoring that is needed. We teach them how to sew so they can easily sell, different things like that based on the community. We also collaborate with local stakeholders like, their women leaders and there may be religious and traditional leaders who are influential in their lives. When we collaborate, we see that we get better results. And lastly, through other organizations like UNGEI, One Campaign Y20, I've been able to, lend my voice and volunteer both locally and globally, and ensuring that, policies are made to favor girls, and and I also have young people who are passionate like me. So I try to show them opportunities which they can be a part of to also lend their voice and volunteer. So this is the way that my fellow activists and I are making a change in our community.
That's amazing. And you girls are both very, very inspiring. And Mariana, like about your work, like the way you're able to not only limit yourself to local issues like in Mexico, but you're also going abroad and still working over there, which is just so, so inspiring to see. Thank you, both of you, for all this amazing work that you do.
Thank you too for the work you do.
Yeah.
And I guess our next question is, as sisters, how can we create an environment in which we nurture and support each other's activism to increase our impact?
And Wadi, would you like to start?
Sure. So for me, I think there's power in collaboration. And for me, collaboration mustn't be like in person. For example, Mariana isn't here in Nigeria, neither are you. But, we have platforms in which we could talk about the work we're doing. The first step for me is words of encouragement. They've gone a long way for me, where sometimes I feel down, maybe things aren't going the way I think. And I have this friend who just messages me, "Hey girl, I'm proud of you, you're doing well." It uplifts my spirit. So words of encouragement, help a lot. We could encourage each other. Secondly, we all belong to different networks, so we could actually introduce each other to other networks. For example, Mariana is into STEM. Maybe I know someone in that field. I could tell them about the work she does. Maryam Nivaal, if I know something maybe going on in Canada, things like that, we link each other up. And so for me, these two ways are ways in which we could help. And also mentoring younger girls, who may not have the same opportunities as we do. For example, we have maybe international networks that somebody else may not know exist. So we could also introduce them to those networks, introduce them to maybe courses online and programs that are ongoing, which they can participate in. So for me, these are ways in which we could help each other as sisters to grow and make more impact.
Definitely.
For sure.
And what about you, Mariana? What do you think?
Well, as Wadi said, I think mentorship is really, really important. It's not enough to identify an issue and work for it. You need a group of people, preferably a group of girls, who can help you out and who you can teach after you decide to move on to someone else, to something else. So for me, it was with my Girl Up Club. So I started the Girl Up Club here in Mexico, and we built an incredible community of over 20 clubs right now in my state. And now that I'm moving abroad, I know that I can start to build that from scratch again, so we can be more connected, even with activists all over the world, as well we have the opportunity to, thanks to Girl Up and the Dream Big Princess campaign. So I think it's really important, and especially in moments of crisis, to stick together, to really get involved in issues that maybe don't affect us personally, but we know that are still important to tackle at some point. So definitely communication, mentorship, forming great alliances, and networking are super important points.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us, both of you, Mariana and Wadi. It's clear from this dialogue that stories have power. It was wonderful to hear from all three of our guests today in this regard, and we also have learned how important solidarity in activism is.
So we hope to continue to see intergenerational collaboration and partnership moving forward, and are excited to see the important work that all of our panelists will continue to be doing. If you are a young person and you want to get involved, we encourage you to reach out to UNGEI's Transform Education community by emailing youth@ungei.org. And you can follow UNGEI on Twitter with the handle @UNGEI, or on Instagram at UN Girls Education. So thank you to everyone watching, and thank you so much to Jana to giving us this space, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of the event today.
Thank you so much, girls. That was absolutely awesome. And I really enjoyed hearing about how you think sisters should be standing together and how's the best way to do that. So thank you again.